if no one's shooting at you, you don't have to get rattled. You could stay calm under pressure, because what we do in the civilian world, it really doesn't compare to what we've gone through in the military. We as veterans, you have to be careful of the expectations. We think highly of you, but it's more than just leadership by itself. And people aren't going to automatically give you respect just because of what you've done, responsibilities. It just doesn't work that way. If in the heat of things, how are they going to react? Are they going to be able to lead well? Being accountable when you're driving your teams is just really key. It's not just working hard, it's understanding what the team needs and what the company needs and being available. The head of culture is the leader of the company. If the leader of the company, the founders, the founding team, isn't driving the culture, that needs to be instilled with everybody who has a team.
Welcome to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm joined by David Dickey, founder and CEO of the Patriot Group. David brings a rare perspective to the defense industry as he's led Marines in combat, built and exited aerospace and defense company, and now works with founders, CEOs, and boards to place senior leaders in some of the most demanding environments in the defense industrial base. We'll talk about leadership under pressure, what separates great defense executives from people who just look good on paper, and why hiring is one of the most underestimated risk factors in defense companies. So David, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Dave, for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's going to be great. First of all, thank you for your service, fellow servicemen. So that is awesome.
Yeah, thank you too, Dave.
Yeah, you bet. And so let's talk about, your background. I think your leadership origin is important. You earned a Bronze Star leading, Marines in combat, and you did the defense thing, you did the company thing. So give me a rundown on kind of how you got to where you are. And through that, highlight, I would say, where you've seen leadership that applied in high stress combat environments that transitions well into commercial and, where it doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate it. After leaving the Marine Corps in 2007, started a couple companies. It was still in the aerospace and defense sector. And then my last company was sold, and that was also an aerospace engineering firm. So I started the Patriot Group to be a consulting firm, and there's probably a longer story. Well, it is a longer story how I got into recruiting, but I've always been in the defense space and really fascinated with new technology. So along the way of the last 15 years that I've been doing this, we work with mostly technology, deep tech companies that manufacture something. So nowadays it's either drones, could be software that supports that, could be multiple manufacturing sites or something similar. So, landscape is very, very exciting, as you know, in aerospace and defense. And right now, I guess if you look at the background, my background coming from Marine Corps and then combat experience to today where, dual use for defense companies or commercial companies that play in the defense realm is so important. And some of the things I've learned is, if no one's shooting at you, you don't have to get rattled. You could stay calm under pressure, because what we do in the civilian world it really doesn't compare to what we've gone through in the military. We're at home, sleeping in a warm bed, looking at a screen, or at an event, shaking hands. It's really not that bad. But on the other hand, is understanding how to talk and treat people. It's different than the military, different than the Marine Corps, right? So it's someone that have that self-awareness, someone that understands who they are, and always lead by example. I mean, that's kind of just the basics. Yeah, for me, leading up to what I do now.
Yeah, no, that's good. So in the Marines, what did you do in the Marines?
Yeah, the Marine Corps, I was an infantry officer, and then I served as an infantry platoon commander, company executive officer. And then even as a first lieutenant, I spent a year as company commander, India Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms, California. After that, I went into intelligence, and then I did that till the time I got out in 2007. So, kind of rewind a little bit, and 9/11 happened. And then about a year and a half later, I found myself in Kuwait, and then just waiting for something to happen. And then in 2003, we went into Iraq. I stayed in country till about September, October of 2003, and then went back the following year, January, to Fallujah, and then was present for that. And then after that, came back and then went to the Navy War College, which was a nice little break. And then I got out a couple years after that in '07.
Okay. Let's then jump to, Patriot Group. What do you do? Like, what is your mission statement? And then how do you, who are you delivering? How are you delivering? We got a little bit of who you're delivering to, but.
Yeah. So the Patriot Group, we do executive and engineers and some other positions like finance for aerospace and defense. So we do have a focus on technology companies and companies that make things, right? So I work closely with founders and CEOs and leaders to help identify if there's a critical need to find a leader, whether it's a COO, CFO, CTO, which these are all positions we're currently working on. Head of business development, chief growth officers, chief strategy officer. And then the rest of my team also works on engineers, directors of accounting, and salespeople. So I kind of lead the executives, and then my team works the other positions like engineers and other roles that support these defense firms. So we're mostly working with startups, smaller companies that are at an inflection point, right? So usually at least seed or Series A, where they have enough funding and they're really serious about doing some hiring, or maybe a smaller business that has really decided that they're going to grow and they need to upgrade their team or expand their team. And then that's what I'm familiar with, coming in and helping those companies at that inflection point. For instance, there's a company that's about 200 million now, but 2 years ago they're at 50 million, and they want to grow, times 4 or 5. But some of the people on their staff, they got them to where they are now, but they need some people to help them get to where they want to go. And so I'm very familiar with stepping in there, having those discussions and finding the right team to help the company grow to the next step, whatever that is.
Where do you source your candidates from? Are you focused on previous military, or is it just really anyone that fits the bill?
It's anyone that fits the bill. But when I started the Patriot Group, we were doing career fairs, career transition events. We did about 25 of them. In fact, we started a nonprofit for a few years. It was focused on transitioning military. So looking at those type of candidates is natural to me. So we do that all the time anyways. Sometimes there's kind of an unspoken preference based on the work and the client and who their prospective clients are. Like if they want to get into Department of War, they want someone potentially that came out of those offices, or PEOs or PAEs, they're calling them now, to make those introductions. So, but everyone's very positive about hiring veterans. So it's a bonus. So we look out for them. It's just not the singular focus for hiring.
Yeah. I mean, what's the challenge with placing veterans have you seen? I mean, I've got some thoughts on this, but.
Well, on the one hand, when you're trying to source people and then you just go ahead and narrow the entire field to veterans, for certain engineers or other positions, it can be difficult. And then based on when they're transitioning the skills that they need, it just can be a challenge, even if the company's open to it, right? So most companies we deal with or work with are looking for that plug and play person that have that experience already. I think where veterans come in is where they've had some experience based on what they've done and transition into. So if they went to school for mechanical engineering and been working on turbojet engines, they'd be a natural fit for several space companies and other aerospace companies because of their education and experience. But transitioning them right from service can be tough. Yeah, but we've done it, could be, but we've seen it with text, mechanics. But there's some natural, but there's some that just takes a little bit. So hopefully that answered. I don't know what you've seen on.
I mean, I went through this myself. You take senior military leaders who have been leading thousands of people, combat training, very broad breadth of capabilities and responsibilities. And then they go out thinking, I mean, I had to eat a big piece of humble pie, thinking I had the capability to go into a domain that I didn't know because, well, I got leadership, I got soft skills, coming out the wazoo. There are almost, I mean, I haven't seen any companies, if they're in a startup growth mode, unless some reason it's been there, that is not going to work. You have to have someone that understands, especially in the executive roles. I think, more of the engineer, that could be a direct, correlation to your point. But if you don't have domain experience, how to run it, you got your MBA. Who cares? Do you know how to run a business? Do you know, like, just some core things? That's a tough transition. And I have not seen many do that or do it well.
No, you're right. It is a wake-up call. We as veterans, and we'll speak to every veteran in general, whether you're a colonel or corporal, is that you have to be careful of the expectations. Yeah, we think highly of you, but it's more than just leadership by itself, right? So you have to be aware and learn the skills necessary. So when someone decides to transition, they go in a particular industry, they really need to do their research. So it's incumbent on them, hopefully, to talk to people that they know have already transitioned. Because if you talk to people that are in or in the transition office, it's going to be a big mess. And people aren't going to automatically give you respect just because of what you've done, the responsibilities. It just doesn't work that way. And God forbid you come out of the service, and then I've seen some people, even senior ones, just take too long and go back to school 4 or 6 years, and then they have a couple of degrees, but they still have no real world experience, and they're further separated from their military service, and that doesn't help anyone either.
So just sticking on the veteran thing for a little bit. So you have a very experienced senior leader, somewhere between, we can even call it lieutenant colonel and above, which is probably natural for a 20-year retirement, even though I know that's shifting around. How would you recommend them to find themselves or put them on a track to be a senior leader at a defense and aerospace company?
Well, first thing, you do have to network, right? And if they have everything is based on their background, just their network, being aware of that industry and learn about it. That's the key thing, because there's, I guess it depends. I mean, if they don't have any experience with any like program offices or technology.
Yeah, let's talk operators. That's the world I came from.
For operators, it's just, it's very tough, right? They do have a few like director of operations, but the company has to be very open to that. We see companies that are using the chief of staff title or something akin to the staff secretary. So you have roles that are similar to that. If they have the right background, they could always be a great business developer, but not everybody wants to do that, right? And then they can make a pretty easy transition into a program management role to oversee people. So it's going to be based on the individual, based on what they want to do. Do they want to lead a program and people? Do they want to be on the staff? So those are the important things. Yeah. So sometimes it helps for them to figure out if it's going to be a program. They may not have the background connections or technical chops really to go right into a startup, right? Because I've seen some junior and mid-career officers, they go into, big-time schools, Ivy League, they go into these incubators, they go into consulting, and then very quickly, they're jumping on these startups that have big names now. But I know a Coast Guard guy that oversaw the unmanned systems for the Coast Guard. Now he's working for a pretty well-known AI company. So it sometimes it helps your background and the place where you're leaving. But
no, I think that's a great point. Yeah, if you came from like a program office overseeing something, there's that transition. That's as people reach out to me, a part of mine has always been like, look, if you want to be in like corporate leadership, you want to get into where you have that influence, you've got to go get some sort of business domain. And mine was, even for 20-year guys, maybe go get your MBA, try to get to a McKinsey or something like that, a consulting where you can have quick transition to business acumen that you can absorb. And then like a chief of staff role or something like that, where a company can bring you in, you could bring those technical skills of business you learn while you learn that domain and then jump in. But
Yeah. Program management. Yeah. No, it's hard. Program management, ops, but it is tough because you got to find that right company that sees who you are. Sometimes it comes from, someone they know. So, yeah. So it's either program, maybe a staff job like we talked about, or go on a different route where you can get those connections through one of those, MIT, Stanford, the Ivy. I know those are tough, but man, they have a built-in network there that can really help. Like if I knew what I knew now, there's some things I probably would have done a lot differently to set myself up for success in this very fun, growing, deep tech defense space, venture capital people I'm talking to all the time, just so I can learn more about what the space is and what the startup companies are going through. What is pre-seed? What is seed? What is Series A through whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. Well, how have you seen the aerospace and defense market shift in the last, we'll say, I was going to say 5 years, but let's say decade, is there, from a talent perspective, and this isn't now veteran focused, this is just general discussion, is senior executive talent, where you're focused, personally, not necessarily your whole company, supply, demand, certain skill sets that are changing. How have you seen that market shift, or has it?
It has shifts. I think because just we're in a higher degree of technology, being familiar with that. So the senior leadership that I talk to have to be very tech savvy. I mean, they don't have to be engineers. They have to understand what technology is and what it means. What does go to market mean for that technology? And if they want to be successful just in the space, generally speaking, in unmanned systems, they need to understand the dual commercial defense space. It's really, really important. And so it's you just reading, connecting, going to where, talking to people that are in it. So it just seems that people, I'm not saying smarter, you got to be very, very, much more well informed, right? So when I got out of the military in '07, I'm making trips to DC doing BD on the dark suit, overcoat, you know, brushing the snow off at Dulles Airport, going to the hotel, and, the stuffy meetings and doing all that. It's really changed a lot. Leadership now in these companies that are starting, they're my son's age and they're in their 30s, right? So they have a different perspective. So you got to be more savvy. You have to understand, that someone who's a founder maybe, 20 years younger than you are and still be on the team and fit in a startup. It's it's just a completely different world now. It really is.
How are you seeing in the probably last 6 months, AI domain knowledge, is that becoming more of a requirement for, your searches?
Yes, because so you have the hardware piece, right? And then everything that ties it together is AI or something similar, right? Machine learning, quantum technology. It's huge, right? Because every system is going to be controlled by some AI system, right? That goes on top of it. So now it's just, you have to intrinsically think about what's the AI platform that's going to, control, this platform, whether it's the unmanned system flies, drives, swims, or whatever. Yeah, you have to understand all that. It's just super, super critical. I mean, everything I do every day is AI something. So search how I better write, present resumes, all kinds of things. So
Talk to me about your process of helping out. I come to you and want, I think this is people that haven't dealt with recruiters. It's interesting. I'm looking for, let's call it a CRO, and I'm a, defense tech company. How do you go through the process, and then how do you screen for folks? How do you find folks, and how do you screen?
yeah, I love it. So I came up with a method and just called it Patriot Method, but it really starts, like the P in Patriot is planning, right? It is super, super critical to get that down because every company has an idea and then they might even have a job description. But what does that really say? It gives a laundry list, right? So we have to go through that, dissect it. What's required, what's not? Let's take what's not out there. I'll put it on there because if you put required and nice to have, then why have nice to have if it's not required? not required, right? I had a conversation with a potential client the other day, and there was a bunch of things on nice to haves. I'm like, is that a nice to have? Oh, no, that's a must have. I'm like, okay. So it starts with that conversation, really planning. And then if they don't have a scorecard, we help them build that. So scorecard really quickly is a framework of requirements or key things, whether it's culture, their particular background or disposition, their experience. But if you have a scorecard and everyone goes off of that, then people don't deviate because someone like, very cool, a good talker, they like them. So some of the personality things kind of go by the wayside. And then hopefully the intent is that everybody will be focused on hiring the best candidate based on the same scorecard, right? The same method of scoring. So once we get that, then we go about the search, right? So we attract most people by looking internally to our network, which we have thousands. For CRO, I would look, okay, is it on-site, hybrid, you still got to be close, and then there's fully remote. And what does that all mean? And then once we define that, we start reaching out and having conversations with either people I know or I'm connected with or both. And then for those that aren't, then I'm looking for someone to have a conversation. And I'm basically saying, hey, are you open? And I have this particular role. From my experience, I think you might be a good fit. Do you have time for a conversation? It's either yes or no, and we have that conversation. Once we identify someone who we think is qualified based on that scorecard, right, we put together a submission package because we've talked to them. We've had a video call. We asked them to fill out a questionnaire, and we put together this really nice submission that connects who they are to the requirements, and we present that to the executive team for them to review. And then they let us know what the next steps are. And then the next steps are based on how the company interviews. Sometimes they ask us for feedback how to make that happen, but we follow that. But if it's an executive, at some point, there will be an in-person, and almost every time there'll be some type of brief or something to explain to the executive team, hey, if I step in this role, this is how I'm going to be successful based on the information you gave me and what I know about this position. And then, there's a down select of who, they may want to move forward, and then an offer and hopefully acceptance, right? The biggest thing is constant communication with candidates and the client and the team that's hiring. You got to do it very regularly. Everybody has to know where they are. Even by the time you get to an offer, everybody should know what that is. Should never be any surprises, right? Invariably, if you don't communicate, at the end, there'll be surprises. When there's surprises, there's hesitation. Where there's hesitation, there's doubt. And then you're looking at rolling the dice maybe to see if someone accepts an offer because it may not be in line with what, you discussed. So I went through that pretty quickly, but hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, that does check. That seems pretty standard. Part of my question was also, how do you screen for the ability, their willingness for using AI? How would you, because I imagine companies, similar to us, are like, we need an AI leaning forward candidate. We need someone that is, because it's changing fast, learning to incorporate and maximize that. How do you kind of screen for that?
We would ask how do they use AI now and in the past. Ask, what was it that the projects they worked on? Why was it incorporated? Why was it successful or not successful? And then if it wasn't successful, why wasn't it? And then ask them, give us an example. If you're going to step into this role, and give them a scenario on how to use or potentially use AI in a situation and see how they answer that. So it's going to be a series of questions to ask them how they would do it. And then really part of when I send them something to fill out after, it's going to ask again, I want to see how they answer it. And see how those things match up. So if an AI is a critical piece, we're going to continue asking that just to make sure. And I'm certain the client will too. And it may even be part of a brief. So by the time someone gets hired, at least the way we do it, you'll know enough about someone's background and experience, that should come through. Sometimes if you do too fast, everybody wants to be hired fast, and that's fine. But these conversations have to be deep enough that you have a good understanding of someone's capability. The other thing is, you will talk to people this person has worked with and worked for. And if anything is a key piece, leadership, AI, certain tools, you ask the people that you're conducting a reference check about them, how they do that, how they use them. Would they be comfortable using this in this particular situation? So you're asking similar questions throughout the process to gain greater insight about what their experience is on pretty much the same questions. You're just, continuing and just trying to go deeper and deeper to have a good understanding until you're like, okay, this person checks the box on this.
What do you think separates high impact defense executives that you're trying to place from someone who just looks great on paper, has all the right logos and rules?
You're really trying to uncover someone that can make a difference. So it does, what is their disposition, right? If in the heat of things, how are they going to react? Are they going to be able to lead well? And then asking questions of, certain situations where they did well or didn't do well, ask them to share some of the things where they had to overcome a particular challenge. And then ask them a few questions on what some of their wins were. So if it's a high impact, then you're going like, what was your impact here? Did you have an impact? Was it your team? Was it somebody else? What are some of the things that you can say you had ownership of that had significant impact on the company and the P&L? And then listen to what they have to say. Yeah. So even going through all that, at the end of the day, it's especially if you have a few good candidates, it's going to come down to, judgment call. Who does the hiring team feel would be the best fit for the company moving forward? But yeah, it's asking those questions, asking them about that, and have them explain to you their impact, similarly to what the impact the company wants to see happen. There's companies at certain points that, there's a CFO, the company just couldn't move forward with the current one. So we found someone that had small business, they understood to grow to big business, and they came from a large company, a large prime. So they knew from small business to big business and what it takes to get from a small business to big business. And then talking with the people that they work for directly as direct reports on their performance. Yeah, it's really detailed and all encompassing when you're trying to find out and discover, will this person really be an impact player? Or because you're right. Do they look good on paper? Do they sound good when you talk to them on video? Do they look good? Do they dress good? Yeah, you have to dig pretty deep.
Where have you been bamboozled? Give me some stories where you thought someone was good, the company like, oh my God, said all the right thing, and then just did not work.
There's a couple of times where people were hired and they just weren't showing up, right? I guess there was some underlying baggage that ended up coming up later on. And looking back, oftentimes, and I'm not saying I hate to admit it, but oftentimes when you look back when things didn't work out, you could see the indicators when in retrospect, you're like, gee, yeah, maybe. I mean, I had someone I hired for a president of a company. They liked him over someone else because I guess the caveat, even though I take responsibility to a certain extent, whether I would have gone with someone else or not, they hired them. But I know a year later, this PE firm that hired this president, they weren't doing well. And so they had to pull back operations and they had to let a lot of people go. They hired someone that wanted to be technical, but in the end, the leadership and their ability to have an impact on that company, that PE-owned company, they just didn't have it. And so, I guess kind of the worst case scenario with a company was like the PE firms like had to get rid of them, had to fire people, consolidate, and then, try to rework everything to get it sold. Yeah, so that it wasn't a personality thing. It was just a capability thing. Though I've seen people step in that I've worked with as a CEO of this one company, didn't know balance sheets, come to find out he ended up being the reason why his company basically was closed. So you have to understand what it is to run a company, whether it's 20 or 200. You have to be able to read a P&L. You have to be able to treat people. You have to have that track record. So, people can look good, but in the end, sometimes it still doesn't work out.
Yeah. Who is example of someone who they took a flyer on and just crushed it? Like what traits did they have? Just trying to get kind of the two ends of someone you're like, I don't know, just crushed it.
I don't see that many times, but I had a great engineer that I really liked, and they needed someone in this company. So he's kind of under the radar as a junior engineer, but I mean, I keep hearing it today, and it's probably been 5 years that this guy's just killing it. Yeah, so sometimes it's just someone who's good. It's just, I hear later on just how good he or she is and how big of an impact, they have on a company. Yeah. So that's happened a couple times where, I actually had an Air Force veteran going in for a finance position, and the hiring manager was like, I don't know, Dave, but we'll try her out. And then, months later, he basically felt like he couldn't do without her. She was having that big of an impact that, if she left, it would have been heartbreak, and there would have been a negative impact on the company. So those are the real good stories that I hear.
That's great. Our companies haven't find, these fast growing companies. I mean, some of them are scaling from 8 to 100 in like 18 months. Have you found that they struggle to fill the roles with the right people? Do they just accept what's out there at times in order to scale? And is there a gap?
Yeah, I love that question because I'm in it all the time, and I have companies ask me to help them, but they're caught in between hiring internal talent teams, but they're still caught behind. So they're like, oh, well, we want to hire recruiters to help us out, but we also need to hire people, right? So ramping up an internal hiring team can be tough and can take a while. So yeah, there's some growing pains, right? So for instance, in LA, there's large concentration of space companies, deep tech space companies, all competing. If you looked on 5 different space company job boards, all the job descriptions look the same, whether it's SpaceX or, one of the other big companies that they've come from like SpaceX or other similar companies too, right? But now they're all competing for the same people. So I'm trying to educate founders and company leaders on how to differentiate themselves from all those other companies. How are you going to attract someone from a SpaceX or from some other larger company, or have someone convince someone to move out here? The story has to be different, right? What's the career growth? What are they going to see in the next 12 months to 5 years if they're in this role? What is there growth and opportunity for them? Or are you still selling, hey, we got ping pong tables and free lunch and unlimited PTO, come work for us, we're a startup?
Yeah, what are you seeing is the big, are the Googles of old, where they create these campuses? Obviously that's a scaled company, but what do you see as the primary driver for someone that's wanted, but what drives them to accept a role or want to be part of that? Are there any big things that across your collection of searches you found that are moving the needle?
And I talk about this a lot too, and I don't think I mentioned it, but I am working on a book. It's essentially a handbook for CEOs for hiring. So I'm working on different titles to help a lot of the startup founders out. But you have to compete at the basic, if not better, comp range, right? No one's going to move from down the street to you for the same or less. It's not going to make sense. So you have to have that. That compensation has to be in alignment first. Then it's obviously team, mission, but really what you have to be able to show them a growth path. If you're here, this is what it means for you 12 months down the line. And because now people are talking short term, right? The younger generation spends less time in a role than we did before 20 years ago. That's a fact. You can be upset about it, but why would you pass on great talent because they were at SpaceX for 3 or 4 years or went from, SpaceX to this to whatever? It happens, right? So you have to accept that and be open to it because based on their skill set. So first you got to find if they're open and then talk to them about the company, the team, really where they're going, how they as an individual fits in. That it's just so key. Fit in, growth, and whatever that differentiator. Why are we different than the space company around the corner, right? Why are we different? Because if you can't do that, I just don't know how long that conversation is going to go.
Yeah. So do you find mission motivates folks, or is it really the, economic responsibility, those things?
What should be automatic is a cool mission, cool tech, great comp, great benefits, great team. That has to be there. The other thing is you really gotta, what is in it for you that we're talking about? And when you talk to them, ask them, hey, what's important? Is your career growth important? Is your time off important? You got to talk about that because everyone is different. So across the board, you have to have all those things first. I think to even, for them to think it's worth their time to even consider talking with you, right? Yeah, you'll get lucky with someone because they hate their boss or whatever, but most people aren't being underpaid. I'll tell you that much.
Salaries have gone up
significantly.
It's expensive. How much do logos play into what people are looking for?
Sure. If we make an example of a startup drone company that's getting some decent funding and they want to move to the part where they scale and build a bunch of drones, they absolutely want to find someone from one of those other big name companies to step in to help them scale. Because what are they going to hire someone that's never scaled before to help them scale? No. So that's when they're looking at that big logos, could be big names, Anduril. Yeah, some of the, the big name drone companies, Skydio, Shield AI, Neros is growing. Yeah, so all those big companies, they want to find someone that came from there, have scaled it, that knows what it looks like, how to build engineering and manufacturing teams. Yeah, they want to find those people, but they got to up their game, right? More money, more opportunity, more equity, maybe. Yeah. So it's a big game. That's the game I'm in, right? Find me someone from this group of people on the DOW's top 25 list of drone dominance. I want them to come over and do this.
Where you're not funded yet, or you've got a 18-month ramp and runway, I should say.
Yeah. But no, those are real conversations I have with companies like all the time.
Well, it is kind of funny too. I think companies think that, look, because you're in founding a company, you're obviously drinking your own Kool-Aid because you would, and then you're like, they wouldn't want to come to us at a discount? What? Come on.
Yeah, the neatness of the story nowadays is of a startup. That shine is worn off. Okay, so you gotta really differentiate yourself even further than that. Yeah, because I talk to folks all the time about all these things. Yeah, I mean, in the last year, especially when the Department of War opened everything up and seeing these veteran just the money available to the ones that know how to get it, the ones that figured out of the startups that by the time they come out of stealth mode, they already have seat funding, 5 to 10 million. They're ready to go. I mean, I talked to a company that was in stealth for about 5 years. They're going to come out soon. These people are smart. They're getting all their ducks in a row, and they know they have to compete. And when they come out of stealth, some of them are really raring to go, and that's exciting to see. And it's great to talk to them even before it's being announced.
That's good. Okay, pivot a little bit. When does it make sense for a startup? When I say startup, I'm saying everything before like Series C. I mean, someone that's growing, hyper growth stage maybe, to insource their own hiring function.
Like if I'm going to start a company, my network, I'm going to go out to that to fill every role I can, right? And then if it gets to a point where I feel it makes sense for someone to coordinate that, then I'm going to get someone to do that has experience doing that. I can't tell you. I've seen plenty of startups hire people that just don't have that deep tech background. I'm not even sure how they function. But it takes a while to ramp up. And that's what I see is they use their network. That's why they have advisory boards, maybe an expanded founder team. Could be more than just one. I've seen 5 or 6 co-founders. And often the reason they bring them on is their reach, influence, money, and network, right? I may be missing a couple of things there. Yeah, they source it as much as they can. Then when they grow, then they're like, hey, there's one company I know says like, we got to triple our engineering team. Well, you got to get serious about doing that and competing. But to do it internally is as you grow, you build your, talent acquisition. There's some sizable companies that have a lot of, internal talent acquisition folks. You got people that's good at that, software, Android software or machine learning. But doing executive search is really different. And I've been doing it for a while, I guess, because I've done that and started companies. So very familiar with those personalities. Maybe it's the gray hair or something else. But I do know what companies are looking for that differentiates. But again, if it's my company, I'll do as much as I can internally. But comes a point in every hire that timing, necessity, there's a critical point where you're like, we're not doing it on our own. We need to find another way to do this. And that's where I feel that myself and my team come in.
Yeah. Which is almost every startup, because very few startups plan well enough and get it moving fast enough by the time it's like, oh shit, we need it now.
Yeah, no, it'll happen. But yeah, I've been there. Oh crap, I need it now. But yeah, I mean, if they can do it themselves, do it. Plan on what that looks like. That's why I tell companies all the time, they don't always take me up on it, but I tell them, I'm here if you have questions. If I can help you scale or give you ideas how to build your team, I will. Because if someone's bent on doing certain things themselves and they don't need me, that's perfectly fine. I'm a specialist. I'm here when you need a specialist to help you find that person. Get over the hump, maybe. And then I jump in and help them whatever they need.
Yeah, well, that's great. We're going to have to wrap up here in a second. I got one more question for you, though. For a defense founder, aerospace and defense founder that's serious about building a long-lasting company, what's one thing about leadership and hiring you wish more of these folks would understand?
Accountability. Being accountable when you're driving your teams is just really key, right? It's just being accountable to the growth, the mission. It's not just working hard. It's understanding what the team needs and what the company needs and being available. You can't hire your way into success either. So it's not, if I hire these people, I won't have to do that, right? The buck always stops with these founders. They are the head of people. They are the head of culture. Sometimes that's why I don't understand why they hire head of people. Who's the head? The head of people, the head of culture is the leader of the company. If the leader of the company, the founders, the founding team isn't driving the culture, isn't driving the people and being that example, no one else should be, but they should be doing it. You can't delegate the responsibility to be the head of people, head of culture. That's the leader or the founder, the CEO. And then that needs to be instilled with everybody who has a team. It's just super, super critical to do that. Yeah. So I'm kind of ready for that. Someone had asked me that the other day, and I took a little bit longer to think about what was the one leadership trait that I think people should have, especially someone who's starting a company.
So David, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Dave, for having me. I really appreciate it.